Okay, so think about this for a second. We all know ancient Egypt. The pyramids, the pharaohs, the golden masks, it's iconic. But have you ever stopped to wonder where it all went? I mean, you look at modern Egypt, and that ancient world feels like it's from another planet. There's a huge disconnect. So in this explainer, we're going to unravel that mystery.
You know, if you go to a place like India or China, you can literally see thousands of years of history alive and kicking in everyday traditions. But with Egypt, it's different. The language of the pharaohs, their religion, their entire worldview, it's like it just vanished. It's a complete cultural break. And that's the puzzle we're tackling today.
So, really, what happened? How does a civilization that lasted for 3,000 years, I mean, that's longer than the time between the Roman Empire and us today, how does something that monumental just fade away? Well, the thing is, it wasn't a sudden collapse. There was no single catastrophe, no one moment where ancient Egypt just ended. Instead, it was more like a slow fade. Its identity was gradually overwritten, layer by layer, in a massive transformation that took over 1,000 years to complete. So let's start our clock way back, around 525 BCE. By this time, the pharaoh's power was already on the decline. A lot of their authority had shifted to priests and local nobles. This made Egypt vulnerable, and sure enough, the Persian Empire swooped in and conquered it. And that was it for the homegrown native Egyptian pharaohs. Now, the Persians were in charge, but they pretty much let Egyptian culture do its own thing. The first real transformation, the first major layer, came from the Greeks. And this wasn't just a conquest, it was a full-on cultural makeover. See, when Alexander the Great showed up, the Egyptians weren't scared. They were actually relieved. They were so fed up with Persian rule that they welcomed him as a liberator. And to show their gratitude, they did something incredible. They crowned him pharaoh, officially handing over the keys to a new Greek dynasty. And this kicked off what we now call the Hellenistic period in Egypt. The whole idea wasn't to erase Egyptian culture, but to fuse it with Greek traditions. For the next 300 years, under the rule of the Ptolemies, Alexander's successors, you get this amazing, one-of-a-kind hybrid civilization. And you can see just how deep this fusion went. The official language of the government became Greek, but the old sacred hieroglyphs were still used in temples. They even created new gods, like Serapis, who was a mashup of Greek and Egyptian deities, so he'd appeal to everyone. The art blended styles. And yeah, the rulers were Greek, but they called themselves pharaohs. It was a brilliant cultural and political balancing act. Just think about Cleopatra, the famous one. She was Greek, through and through, part of a dynasty that had been ruling for nearly 300 years. And yet she was the first person in her entire family line to bother learning the actual Egyptian language. It was this brilliant last-ditch effort to connect with her people and bring back that ancient identity, but it was already too late. So let's add that to our timeline. 332 BCE marks the Greek conquest, and that kicks off a 300-year-long period of cultural fusion that really started to change what it meant to be Egyptian. All right, so after Cleopatra came the next major power shift, and these guys, the Romans, had a totally different rulebook. For them, it wasn't about fusion, it was about erasure. Yeah, if the Greeks fused cultures, the Romans just assimilated them. They had zero interest in being pharaohs. For them, Egypt was now a province of Rome, nothing more. It was the personal piggy bank of the Roman emperor, a place to get grain from, ruled by a Roman governor. The ancient kingdom and its independence were gone for good. And here it is on our timeline, a sharp, final moment. 30 BCE. The Romans take over, Cleopatra dies, and the 3,000-year-old tradition of the pharaohs is officially, completely over. But even Roman rule wasn't the final nail in the coffin. The most powerful blow to the ancient Egyptian identity didn't come from an army at all. It came from new ideas, in the form of two incredibly powerful monotheistic religions. This happened in a kind of 1-2 punch. First, Christianity swept through Roman Egypt, and its core belief in one God was a direct challenge to the entire Egyptian pantheon. Then, a few hundred years later, the Arab conquest brought Islam, which would become the final, defining layer of modern Egyptian identity. I mean, Christianity was basically a wrecking ball for the old ways.
Suddenly, belief in one god made worshipping Ra and Isis obsolete. The massive ancient temples were either abandoned, turned into churches, or torn down. Mummification stopped because it didn't fit with Christian ideas of the afterlife. And those ancient scripts, like hieroglyphics, just faded out of use completely. And then, in the 7th century, came the final transformation. The Arab conquest brought with it not just Islam, but the Arabic language. And this layer was so total, so all-encompassing, that it cemented a completely new cultural identity, pretty much overwriting everything that had come before. A really powerful symbol of this whole process is the fate of the Great Library of Alexandria. Now, it wasn't a single event, but over centuries, this legendary center of ancient knowledge just declined and was lost. And with its disappearance, a huge chunk of the memory of that classical and ancient world basically vanished.
So here we go. This is the full picture, our completed timeline. You can see it wasn't one thing. It was a 1,000-year-long process of Persian, then Greek, then Roman, then Christian, then Islamic cultures all layered on top of each other until the original was buried deep underneath.
And this process was so absolute that the next part of the story is honestly the most mind-blowing. The civilization wasn't just transformed, it was completely forgotten.
Seriously. For more than 1,000 years, the world basically forgot that ancient Egypt even existed in the way we think of it now. The pyramids were still there, of course, but nobody, not even the people living right next to them, had any idea how to read the hieroglyphs carved on their walls. The language, the history, it was all lost. A dead language.
The great rediscovery, the beginning of our modern obsession, actually started with a French military invasion. When Napoleon Bonaparte invaded Egypt in 1798, he brought soldiers, but he also brought a whole team of scientists and scholars. And these scholars were absolutely floored by what they saw. Their work, and especially their discovery of the Rosetta Stone, is what kicked off the entire modern science of Egyptology. For the past 200 years, we've been on this incredible journey of deciphering the secrets of this lost world piece by piece.
When you think about it, the story of Egypt is a pretty powerful reminder that even the greatest, most enduring civilizations can be buried by time and history. Which leaves you with a pretty wild thought, doesn't it? If a world as incredible as ancient Egypt could be forgotten, what other lost worlds are still out there just waiting to be found?